So, welcome everyone. Once again, a very important topic, digital ID. I don't know how many years I've been talking about digital ID now. I've been warning about it, but it was usually dismissed as some conspiracy theory. I was hallucinating, I was making things up, and I was trying to frighten people. You know, the fear-mongering narrative, of course, was thrown in there too. And here we are today. Virtually, I mean, it's not only the EU Commission, virtually every single government, especially in the Western democracies, are talking about digital ID. And they're not just talking about it, they are implementing it. They're working on it, it has high priority, and they are determined to push this through no matter what. And they will not take no for an answer. So it is high time for us to once again, in massive attempts to try to wake up the people of what is to come. Do you remember the COVID certificate, the green digital certificate that it was called here in the EU? That was supposedly for our health. They were concerned about our health. Well, let me tell you, they weren't. They were not. It was actually introduced. That was like a test balloon. They were implementing it and getting people used to having to show something wherever they went, whether it be a supermarket or a shoe store or riding on a bus or even getting into a movie theater. That's what they were implementing at that point. They were getting you used to showing some form of a certificate to pretty much do whatever you wanted. And some people weren't allowed to do what they wanted because if you didn't have a digital green certificate, guess what? You were no longer included in going after just regular activities. And that's what we're actually looking at once they roll out the digital ID. And a quick look to China, and you will get an idea of what we are actually about to experience. But that's enough for me right now. We have very distinguished guests and experts today. And with no further ado, I would just give Maria the floor. She will introduce all of our speakers. And let's get going, I would say. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's a great honor to be here with you. I want to say on behalf of the Make Europe Healthy Again team, thank you so much to our host, Christine. You're a true warrior and a friend, and thank you for bringing this important topic to the Parliament today. And thank you to all the speakers who came far from the USA, for example, and other parts of Europe, just to be here with us today. I'm delighted to introduce the speakers today. My background, I'm a medical doctor, also a mental health coach, and I'm the founder and president of MEHA, Make Europe Healthy Again. Thank you again for coming, and let's get started with our first speaker, Professor Dr. Richard Werner. He's educated at the School of Economics and holding a doctorate from the University of Oxford. Richard Werner has served as Professor of Banking, Finance and Economics since 2005, including at the University of Southampton, Fudan, University in Shanghai and Goethe University Frankfurt. He has held senior roles in finance and policy, including positions at Bear Stearns Asset Management, Jardine Fleming Securities, and as consultant to the Asian Development Bank. He advises and supports the establishment of community and small banks. He introduced the term quantitative easing in 1995 and is the author of the best-selling book Princes of the Yen. His quantity theory of credit and empirical research on bank money creation have contributed significantly to monetary economics. Thank you, Richard, for being with us.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and thanks to you for joining us. I'll talk about CBDCs, the tokenization of life, and the digital ID prison. Now, the central planners are keen to introduce digital currency. According to a McKinsey study of 2022, at the time, 90% of all central banks pursue a central bank digital currency project. Okay, and what's new about this? We're being told it's the digital aspect. That's how they're marketing it, and there's various statements from, for example, the European Central Bank and other central banks where they emphasize, oh, you know, we need something digital. It's the digital age, so it's quite natural. Well, is that narrative really true? Because most of the payments we're doing nowadays in our everyday lives have been digital. They've been digital for decades, whether it's debit card payments, credit card payments, Apple Pay, Google Pay, Monzo, even, you know, the ones that appear to be new and novel, well, they still all link back to a bank account. And so banks are involved. And how do banks process this? How are transactions made? Well, our bank money, which is the money we've been using for a long time, certainly at least half a century, has been digital. We have been using digital money. And that's an important point because it shows that what they're selling this at as the novelty being the digital aspect is just not true. We've been using what you could call BDC, bank digital currency, for decades. That's not new. The digital aspect is not new. So what is new? What is new about CBDCs? Well, we've been using BDC. What's the difference to CBDC? It's the C. What is the C? It's the central aspect. That is the new thing, and they do not emphasize that in their marketing efforts that we have to pay for. So what's really happening is that they want us to move away from what we've had so far, which is decentralized banks and decentralized bank money creation and decentralized digital money, to centralized money. This is what this is about. And when you think about that and you realize the centralization aspect is actually the key aspect, then I'm sorry, but you know, the reality is the centralization of power into fewer hands is not a good trend. Fascism was about the concentration of power. Communism was about the concentration of power. Any dictatorship wants to concentrate power. Now, what's the justification for this? They will come up with stories, but when you look at the politics, it's very clear. In our day and age and where we live, the politics is not convincing because actually the opposite should happen. We claim to be fans of democracy. That means equal rights for people, participation of people in the decision-making process, not one-way diktats from above by central planners. Now, the politics is clear. There's no justification for this, but they're selling it us on the economics. What about the economics? Well, the economics is also very clear. There's no justification for centralization, even in the economics. What is the economics? Well, in order to have both democracy and economic success and prosperity, we need decentralization. The principle of decentralization is also known as the principle of subsidiarity, officially subscribed to, where we are, by Brussels, but of course in reality ignored almost all the time, is about delegating power and decision-making, the actual decision-making, to the lowest possible level, wherever possible. And it's been shown any organization involving humans will be more successful if you follow that principle because it works. People on the ground, at the front line, whatever it may be, they can react quickly, they can make decisions. But so the decisions will be better, will be more effective, but also people will be motivated. That's why the Soviet Union didn't really work so well, because you had these crazy instructions which made no sense, but you still had to do it anyway. So this principle is well established. I wrote a paper on this, Subsidiarity as Secret of Success. And it's an HR journal, Employee Relations. It's open access, so have a look at it. So we have no political justification and no economic justification. And yet the central planners demand more power and more concentration of power into their hands. And it's pretty bad, I tell you. It's been going on for years. They want to control all transactions. Let's start with transactions. Since the 2014 e-invoicing directive and the regulation 910, the Commission has made law that there will have to be electronic identification in order to allow for the creation of EU digital identity wallets. And some countries have already implemented this. Hungary, of all countries, actually has moved ahead of others in implementing this. And that means that there's no more economic transaction freedom, because as a company, you're not allowed to issue an invoice if it's not through the system with specific software, which is part of the centralized control. And of course, that is the first step to then also intervene and, perhaps stop transactions, whatever you want. Once you have the infrastructure, you can use this power. But it's not just Europe. We see the same trends, just like in 2020, when suddenly everyone had the same very strange list of prescriptions that needed to be implemented. Japan already has a qualified issuer invoice registration system, and so on. So what is this? This is actually the fallback plan B route to impose digital ID and total digital control of all our transactions, in case things don't work out so well with Plan A. So we have to be aware of that. Plan A is central bank digital currency that are programmable, the power to create and allocate new money, which would give this to the central bank, and therefore also transfer fiscal powers, the only sort of remaining power in the hands of parliaments, which is one of the definitions of democracy, for parliaments to decide over budgets. Obviously, we're not in the parliament here, because that's not the democratic parliament when you don't have those powers. But they want to take them away from those parliaments in Europe that have those powers. The central planners want to take that job. But it's the transactions. And here, of course, what is the programmability? Well, is the infrastructure being created? It could be anything. It could be climate change, carbon footprint. That could be the principle, but it can be other principles. Do you support the war? Are you on the right side with your opinion on whatever currently is, countries we're making war on? It could be anything. It could be you're stepping outside a 15-minute city, and so your money perhaps shouldn't work. But it's not just transactions. It's also assets. And this gets pretty scary here, I think. The Bank for International Settlement, the central bank, originally created, like most central banks, as a privately owned institution, but extraterritorial. It created the precedent for extraterritorial organization that is above countries, outside countries. So it's sort of in Switzerland, but it's not actually in Switzerland, in Basel. Has suggested that, well, we need to tokenize everything, all assets, and bank deposit, bank money, central bank money, as well as other assets. And there needs to be seamless integration of all this and programmability in one platform, we are told. So what are these other assets? It turns out we already have national organizations that are currently compiling asset registers. And you think, okay, that's financial assets. Perhaps add land. Well, you can add quite a lot. They want to add everything, natural assets, the air we breathe, the water we drink, the oceans, everything. Now, why is this? Tolstoy wrote a good piece on this when he criticized economists for only having land, labor, capital in the production function. Why is the air not in there? The energy, the sun. Well, because they haven't figured out how to control access and charge for it. And that's what's happening with digital ID. They now are able to do this. And now they want to do it, as we hear from World Economic Forum agenda contributor Lindsay Hooper at Sustainability Institute in Cambridge. We need to bring nature onto the balance sheet, allocate a value to it, and bring it into the accounting and financial mechanism. Well, and of course, there's various agencies in the US, in the UK, in Europe, in many countries already doing this for nature, and they're digitalizing it now. A natural capital register, the value, the quantity, and the quality of natural resources in one place. Now, this agency in the UK says, well, there's some critics that suggest, oh, we're trying to put a price tag on nature. It's important to understand that this is not the intention of natural capital accounts. Of course not. Because the intention is to control access to nature and charge for it. And they themselves go on, well, actually, what we're going to do is put monetary terms to nature, calculating where possible monetary value to the benefits produced by natural assets, and this will support, they say, prioritization. In other words, some people will get access, others not, and the criteria, well, they can be made up. Europe, the EU, is creating the Anti-Money Laundering Authority, AMLA, under a lot of secrecy and not exactly very transparent itself. And of course, this asset register will then have all sorts of assets in it. And of course, we then have as a next step the tokenization of these assets. And why is that important? In Switzerland, they're building the European Digital Asset Exchange. There will be other asset exchanges. Well, tokens can be useful to the extent that they facilitate the process of issuing, storing, and transferring value. So access can be programmed, not just on transactions, but also access to assets, including natural assets and the air we breathe. And ownership of these tokenized assets can be transferred from you to the central planners. That seems to be the agenda. So why aren't they rolling this out faster? Well, McKinsey in its study said, oh, there's some obstacles. Technical challenges, for example, internet connections, things like that. Secondly, a clear or substantiated market value proposition has yet to be documented. In other words, there is no actual benefit of this for ordinary people. Some consider CBDC benefits to be limited relative to already established private solutions. We have digital money, it works. And thirdly, I'm still quoting McKinsey, trust remains a hurdle for a meaningful share of citizens and system participants to accept this, who question the motives behind CBDCs, often suspecting governments of aiming to monitor or restrict financial activities. Of course, we now realize it's not just financial activities, it's about all activities, and the programmability is a key feature. The Bank of England asked the government, the politicians in the UK, to give them the power to have programmable digital currency, and that is a control tool. The pilot CBDC projects that are ongoing, for example, this one in Brazil in particular, experts have already found out, yes, it has all those features. You can freeze transactions, you can take people's money away, you can intervene in those ways. Now, the central planners claim we will not abuse the limitless power that digital ID and CBDCs will give us. Okay. Well, should we trust them? Well, I can be brief here. I think all of you know examples of how this sort of power has already been abused. Just thinking of Justin Trudeau's ending the peaceful demonstrations by truckers in Ottawa. Their bank accounts were frozen. Their ability to buy food is how they got them. Too few used cash and digital currency. Well, they didn't have CBDCs, so they had to pass laws to do it, and that will be very easy once you have CBDCs. The police froze 206 financial products, including bank and corporate accounts, disclosed 56 entities associated with vehicles, facial recognition, even 253 Bitcoin addresses were identified, and PayPal was also shut down. So that's how they can do it. Now, interestingly, no such financial controls had been used previously to stop criminals. But, of course, peaceful demonstrating citizens, that's when it seems the central planners get pretty creative about how to stop people. And of course, we all know what happened in 2020. Digital ID suddenly were a topic. Vaccination passports as a backdoor to introduce digital ID. And then, of course, programmability. You can close access if you don't do X, Y, Z. And it can be anything the government central planners decide. And now we have the EU commissars already abusing their dictatorial powers that they've had for a while, but now they're showing these powers by declaring very polite, considered critics like Jacques Beau, a Swiss former sort of army officer in his, just giving his opinions. He's an outlaw now. He's been sanctioned. He can't buy food. He can't leave the country, Belgium, in order to travel back to Switzerland. It is quite extraordinary. Now, on the monetary front, the CBDC is the biggest upheaval in our monetary system in more than 300 years. But the digital aspect is not new. What is happening, therefore, is the centralization, but it's a particular type of centralization. The central banks are ripping up the old agreement between the banks and the central banks, which was that the central banks deal with banks and the banks deal with us. And overall, the banks haven't really abused that. They've never sold our data ever, our transactions data. They haven't. That's really why they've become the enemy, because that's supposed to be a currency that they want to sell and trade, and banks have refused to do that. So the central banks are now stepping into the arena and want to compete against their regulated, the banks. This is like playing football. The umpire saying, well, it's a bit boring. I'm going to join. I'm going to score some goals, but I'll still reserve the right to blow the whistle, give the red card, give the yellow card. Who's going to win that game? So the bank regulators will compete against the banks, because CBDC is just a current account at the central bank. That's what's happening. Of course, this conflict of interest explains what the central banks have been doing. They've been taking anti-bank policies for many decades. Already in 2002, I warned about how the central banks were creating these asset bubbles, banking crises, recessions. And of course, that has continued ever since. Unabated, we've got regulatory moral hazard. The more crises they create, the more powers we give them. Each time they demand, oh, it's because we didn't have enough powers, which is not actually true and should have been stopped earlier. So can we trust the central banks to give them yet more power? I think the answer should be a resounding no. The high inflation that started in 21 was created by the central banks. No matter what they tell you about wars, the economics is very clear. I could forecast it quite successfully from May 2020 onwards that 18 months later we'll get significant inflation, because the money creation was just massive, off the charts. Then the central banks imposed a fake pandemic. You know that story. And we know that people like Jeffrey Epstein, it's now public record, were involved as early as 2017 in setting up the scheme of this great pandemic for some investors to make a fortune, such as Bill Gates. And then we can also make money injecting people with stuff and solve the problem, as Epstein and Bill Gates discussed, matter of public record, of how to get rid of the poor people. And of course, it was used at the same time to push digital ID. Now, this is, what they're giving us is not the only option. We can have prosperity. Their goal is zero growth, negative growth. Germany now, third year of recession, first time since 1933. But actually, we could have high growth everywhere in the world and prosperity for all. How do you do that? 200 years of strong economic growth in Germany were due to many, many small banks, local money creation, money lent to small firms that are the main employer. 60%, 70% of employment is with SMEs. That's how you spread the prosperity. These hidden champions in Germany, where Germany really sticks out, is small firms that are global market leaders. Yes. Now, how's that possible? Because Germany has the largest number of banks in Europe. Well, we should use past tense, had the largest number of banks. And they were mostly small local banks. That is the way to generate prosperity. But the central planners don't like that, and they've been killing banks. So ECB policies have been very successful. Under the ECB, a very young central bank, already 6,000 banks have disappeared in Europe. And surprise, surprise, it's not Goldman Sachs that has disappeared. So last chance saloon, and I'm wrapping up here. The overarching trend of the 20th century was the concentration of power in the hands of fewer and fewer people. Lord Acton, quite wisely, and he was really an observer of politics for many decades, concluded power corrupts. That's the reality. That's human nature. If you give people power, and too much power, it will lead to bad results. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. So we have to stop the further spread of digital ID and the introduction of CBDCs. Already Europe is being deindustrialized, economically destroyed. We can't give these central planners that have delivered this yet more powers. Instead, we need to decentralize, break up the concentrated power, oppose digital ID. We are sovereign individuals. We don't need to prove our identity. If somebody wants to check identity, well, that's their problem. We need to oppose digital asset registers and tokenization of our assets and of nature. And we need, most of all, of course, to oppose CBDCs. A decentralized monetary system is the future. Many small local banks in a decentralized fashion, implementing subsidiarity. That is proven to be very successful. That's how, that's how China became an economic superpower within one generation. They moved from one bank in the Soviet system, central planners loved it, to 5,000 banks with 30 loan officers in 35 branches. That's more than 5 million people checking millions and millions of small firm loan applications for productive business investment. It's easier to find people to govern themselves than people fit to govern others, because those who are currently governing us, they're not fit to do so. Thank you very much.
I have to interject myself real quick because we have two very special guests here today, and the second one just arrived. And I would like to recognize them. So the first special guest we have here today is the Senator of the Upper House of Ireland. Very welcome, Sharon Keogan. Please give it up for Sharon. Thank you so much for all you're doing. And who just arrived is my very good friend, Andrew Bridgen, a former member of parliament in the UK. And we have been fighting this fight on all kinds of ends for so long. I'm really honored that you made the trip and came here today. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much. So our next speaker is, and before I come to our next speaker, I quickly want to inform you that our speaker, Professor Dr. Richard Werner, made an interview with Tucker Carlson. I highly recommend that you watch this interview, and also very recently an interview with Catherine Austin Fitz and Tucker Carlson was published as well. And you can find out more about Catherine Austin Fitz's work on solari.com. Very good source. So that is something I needed to mention. Our next speaker from the United States of America is my dear friend and our MEHA Steering Committee member, Reggie Littlejohn. She is founder and president of Anti-Globalist International and Women's Rights Without Frontiers. She is also the co-founder of the Sovereignty Coalition, a non-partisan organization focused on national sovereignty and medical freedom. She's a U.S. attorney and graduate of Yale Law School. She has testified 8 times before the United States Congress and addressed multiple international bodies, including the European Parliament, UK Parliament, United Nations, White House, the Vatican, and so on. She was featured by major media outlets, including BBC, CNN, Fox News, Voice of America, and many more. Thank you for coming, Reggie.
Thank you so much for having me. Can you hear me? Yes, okay. I would like to thank MEP Christine Anderson for being at the very forefront of these issues for many, many years and for hosting this important event. Humanity stands at a crossroads. If international interoperable digital IDs become mandatory, humanity will become trapped in a digital gulag. According to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 19, quote, "Everyone has the right to freedom of opinion and expression." This right includes freedom to hold opinions without interference and to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas through any media and regardless of frontiers. Free speech is a human right. Indeed, it is the fundamental human right on which other human rights depend. Nothing will chill free speech more quickly than having social media posts tracked through artificial intelligence and mandatory digital IDs. If we are expressing opinions that are deemed misinformation or disinformation or misinformation or hate speech by whoever is in power, we can be silenced on social media, and indeed, we can be cut off from our credit cards and our bank accounts, as what happened with the Canadian truckers. In June of 2023, together with the EU digital COVID certificate infrastructure, the World Health Organization officially rolled out a system of interoperable international digital health IDs, and they are working on the verifiable digital health wallet. So this is the pillar of the control grid. There are 4 aspects. I think of it as almost like a 4-legged chair. There are 4 aspects to creating a trap for humanity. One is digital IDs, one is central bank digital currencies, or any other kind of currencies that are programmable. One is artificial intelligence, and the last one is the physical infrastructure that is required by artificial intelligence. Now, these digital IDs can be used to establish an infrastructure that could lead to a Chinese-style social credit system. And the pretext for this change, it can be, the pretext can be to stop illegal immigration, or to stop election fraud, or to protect children. But whatever the pretext, the result is the same: building a control grid. So in China, if you want to see where we're headed, they've got a social credit system where they've got a digital ID, and it's an app on people's phones, and they centralize through artificial intelligence everything about a person that comes from the digital world. So it can be facial recognition, real-time geolocation, where you live, where you work, your social media posts, your internet spending history, your internet search history, your medical history, your criminal history if you have one. And they put it all together to have an assessment of how trustworthy of a citizen that you are. Trustworthy in China means you do everything you're told and you never make any waves. You certainly never criticize the government. Now, this is the kind of thing that is technologically possible in the West. It's not like China is ahead of us technologically. We can do this, and I'm worried that we will do it if we don't resist it. So the World Economic Forum created a chart. Could you put the chart up, please? Okay. This appeared on their website in January of 2021 at the height of COVID, and it's embedded in an article entitled How Digital Identity Can Improve Lives in a Post-COVID World. And this chart is a vision of what a full-blown digital ID would offer. The digital IDs would be used to open bank accounts, travel, access humanitarian aid, buy and sell online, use social media, file taxes, vote, collect government benefits, own or use a telecommunications device like a laptop or a cell phone, and to monitor smart cities. This looks very much like the China social credit system. And of course, it would start out as being voluntary so that they can get people voluntarily to sign up for this through convenience. But then when the infrastructure is in place, the risk is that they will suddenly make it mandatory. And in this article, the World Economic Forum holds up as a positive example the Estonian digital identity approach. And if any place does have what amounts to a mandatory digital ID, it's Estonia. And I would note that during COVID, if an adult in Estonia refused vaccination or testing, they would be shut out and denied access to restaurants, entertainment venues, gyms, conferences, and public meeting places. So this shows the true intent of the digital IDs. And when combined with central bank digital currencies, the control grid is complete because they can control you through every aspect of your life. So we're talking about programmable money, meaning that if they can say, if you can spend your money, when you can spend your money, like let's say there's another pandemic, and let's say that you are deciding that you're not going to be vaccinated or you're not going to get, the 5th booster or what have you. They could say, okay, you need to be quarantined in your own home, so they can program your money so that it does not work outside of your home. So you can't get into the car and buy gas. You can't do anything outside, or they could say you have to, if they want to discourage saving, they could say you have to spend it by a certain date. They could say you can only, if you've already flown someplace and you've used up your carbon credit, they can stop you from buying another flight that year. I mean, the list goes on. It's, as much as you can imagine is what they can do with programmable money. It can be tied to carbon credits. I'm not saying that this is happening now. I'm not saying that they're doing that now, but I'm saying that the infrastructure exists now. And we need to raise our voices to stop this from happening. Now, like in China, all of this is powered by artificial intelligence. And so it's only through artificial intelligence that they can track every single aspect of our lives. And they say all of this is for our convenience and for our betterment. But there is a risk that they can turn this into mass surveillance and a system of mass surveillance and totalitarian control. So there's a person called Larry Ellison in the United States. He's the head of Oracle. And I just want to play a little clip of something that he said of his vision. He's very, very powerful. He's not just any guy. He's a really powerful guy. And this is his vision behind artificial intelligence.
Oracle co-founder Larry Ellison predicts AI surveillance will be part of our everyday lives in the future. During a recent Oracle Q&A, Ellison said AI will soon play a major role in monitoring society through a vast network of interconnected cameras, including security systems, police body cams, and vehicle dash cams.
Everyone would see it. Your body cams will be transmitting that. The police will be on their best behavior because we're constantly recording, watching and recording everything that's going on. Citizens will be on their best behavior because we're constantly recording and reporting everything that's going on.
Ellison's vision is for AI to analyze data from this network of cameras in real time in an attempt to prevent crime while also tracking and influencing public behavior for a safer society. However, the idea raises serious privacy concerns. Critics argue it could lead to a surveillance state with constant monitoring infringing on personal privacy rights, while others say it could help solve crimes faster and provide transparency to citizens in cases of excessive force from law enforcement.
We're going to have supervision. In other words, every police officer is going to be supervised at all times.
Ellison's proposal highlights a growing trend among tech giants to harness AI for societal influence, which may significantly reshape our lives in the coming years. For more unbiased updates from all over the world, download the Straight Arrow News app or visit san.com.
So, the vision of at least one very powerful tech giant is that all of us would be wearing body cams at all times, and that everything we say and everything we do will be uploaded into AI. Somewhere else in that interview, he talked about how if you want to go to the bathroom, you can say, Oracle, please turn this off for a bathroom break, and it'll turn off for 2 minutes, but it won't really turn off, because what if you didn't really go to the bathroom? What if you did something in the bathroom you shouldn't be doing? If you get a court order, they can see whatever was happening, in the bathroom. It's just, it's crazy. And he also says that what we really need is drones. Like there wouldn't be any mall shootings anymore because AI would pick up an escalation and they just send in drones to break it up. I mean, this is like 1984 on steroids. And it is what RFK Jr. Has termed turnkey totalitarianism. The infrastructure for this is being built. In fact, I would say it's already here, and we need to regulate it. Okay, otherwise we're going to be living in a dystopian hell. So these digital IDs are the enforcement mechanism for 15-minute cities and smart cities. So what's the difference between a 15-minute city and a smart city? 15-minute city or 15-minute ghetto, as MEP Christine Anderson likes to say, it's just the idea that everybody should be living in a place where everything you need, where you live, where you work, where you shop, where you go out to the restaurant, where you go out to spend time in nature, it's all within a 15-minute walking distance or biking distance from your home. And the idea is, oh, we're going to help you build community. Okay, well, how do you enforce that? I'll tell you how you enforce it. You enforce it through the use of digital IDs connected to, and also on your phone, so they can track you everywhere you go from the phone, but also surveillance cameras on every corner, ring cameras on every door, all of that, so that if you try to go out of your 15-minute radius, they can prevent you. I mean, they can prevent you just by turning off your CBDC, but they can also prevent you through barriers and barricades and then just stopping you, having police stop you or having drones stop you, I suppose, if you go out of your 15-minute radius. So what does this do? I mean, they are like 15-minute ghettos. They are connected to smart cities because the smart cities are the ones that have all the infrastructure of surveillance, to monitor traffic, they say. But what they're also doing is they are tracking your movements. So that if you become a disfavored person, if you're a dissident, if you're talking like I'm talking right now and the powers that be don't like it, you can't escape. So how do we stop this? Obviously, we need, I think that this particular event should go far and wide. Anybody who is listening to me at this moment, and is horrified by this, you should be sharing this. That's the least that you can do is share the link to this event. We need to oppose central bank digital currencies or also any kind of programmable money. We need to regulate AI. The big tech giants are very, very opposed to getting regulated. Okay, they need to be regulated to make sure that this doesn't happen. But then something that people can do on the local level is to combat these data centers, because in the United States and Europe and elsewhere in the world, they are creating these massive data centers. And I mean, these things can be dozens of acres large or even bigger than that, to process all of this AI to surveil us. And there are movements, like in the United States, a couple of places have been able successfully to combat these because they are energy hogs, they are water hogs, they emit, toxins into the air. So just on environmental reasons, people on the local level can oppose these. And you can find out where your nearest data center is just by Googling it. Just go online and say, where are data centers being built? And oppose them, because they can't ultimately create this control grid without these massive data centers. So George Washington once said, if freedom of speech is taken away, then dumb and silent we may be led like sheep to the slaughter. And Benjamin Franklin, another founder of the United States, said, whoever would overthrow the liberty of a nation must begin by subduing freeness of speech. Once this digital gulag is in place, there will be no dissent, because as soon as you voice a dissenting opinion, you will be shut down, canceled, and paralyzed by being cut off from your money. We all need to resist and do our best to escape before the trap snaps shut. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Martin Haditsch, Professor Dr. Martin Haditsch. Thank you for coming. He is, as I am Austrian, he is a specialist in hygiene, microbiology, infectiology, and tropical medicine. Former hospital physician in Austria with 20 years experience in clinical microbiology, parasitology, travel medicine, and vaccinology. Since 2010, he is the head of a microbiological laboratory in Hanover, Germany. Appointed Professor Austria 2012 and Fellow of the International Society of Travel Medicine from 2019. Active in international travel medicine organizations, author and frequent international lecturer. Thank you for coming.
Well, very warm welcome to all of you, and from the bottom of my heart, thank you to MEP Christine Anderson for setting the stage, and for Maria for having me here. Just for your information, I will read my comment down just to stay within the time frame given. Just in short, the offerings of the digital world are very tempting. Generally speaking, everything becomes more convenient, is always available. Nothing can be lost or forgotten anymore. But then, can't anything, maybe everything, be stolen as well? Data theft and data leaks are often downplayed. If you talk to experts, the common comment is where data sets exist, they will be misused, at least as long as they are attractive enough. From this we should learn there is no such thing as secure data, and certainly not in the currently hyped cloud services. So what does digitalization mean for medicine? The aforementioned advantages allows the proponents of unlimited digitalization in the context of digital patient records and digital vaccination certificates to proclaim the misleading and deceptive statement that the digitalization of our healthcare in its planned form would, of course, only be for our benefit, for our health and safety, and without any alternative. Does this claim stand up to proof of concept? We are witnessing an event, namely the so-called corona epidemic or pandemic, that was used, I would say abused, precisely for this purpose. Strategists know perfectly well, health combined with fear is a so-called killer argument. And this fact was empathetically demonstrated during the corona pandemic. I dare say that only the, as we now know, completely fact-free catalogue of pseudo-preventive medical measures enabled politicians to test to what extent a step-by-step concept under the disguise of medical care could ultimately lead to the complete disenfranchisement of citizens. And in this experiment, which was accompanied by considerable, foreseeable and inhumane collateral damage, the entanglement of medicine and digitalization proved to be an extremely potent combination, enabling the so-called elites comprising the military, industrial, medical, media, pseudo-legal, political complex to control the entire world and thus exert a data-driven stranglehold. The fact that this resulted in massive violations, not only of human rights but also of data protection, without the vehement opposition one would have expected from the population, or at least from medical doctors, emboldened politicians and representatives of international organizations to pursue a digital agenda that ultimately aims at the complete enslavement of humanity. All of this is based on the assertion that, under the pretense of the necessity for drastic and comprehensive, indeed all-encompassing measures, only rapidly measurable and individually attributable obedience, that is, obedience verifiable in each individual case, would be the one and only means to control epidemics and pandemics and thus avert greater harm to humanity. And this would only be achievable if the following conditions were met. Number one, through appropriately restrictive and simultaneously binding orders as formulated in the revised WHO Pandemic Treaty and the new IHR. Second, through a correspondingly lean and rapidly responsive decision-making structure, which is achieved by allowing the director of the WHO, that is, a person who is not democratically legitimized and, as the current example shows, also insufficiently qualified, to make more or less globally valid decisions unilaterally, which is independently as an individual, without any possibility of oversight or enforceable accountability. And third, through the digital registration of every person Compliance with these conditions can be verified on an individual basis. Since opposition was to be expected, it was crucial to suppress it by any means necessary, from framing and discrediting even previously highly respected scientists to publishing commissioned narratives supporting pseudo-scientific propaganda to outright lies that have since been proven false. Every method was justified. To avoid the term censorship, which was frowned upon by the public, a broad condemnation of the now widespread term fake news was implemented. Differentiated as we already heard, misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation. And those who, as we now know, deliberately lied, presented themselves as guardians of the truth, established a proverbial ministry of truth, consider themselves omniscient and infallible, and to secure their claim of inviolability passed the Digital Services Act, which has comprehensive validity and thus inevitably and inherently negates, well, even fights, the most important aspect of science and therefore also of medicine, discourse. The negative effects of digitalization were evident during the COVID-19 pandemic. Conducting digitally documented self-tests, digitally transmitted test results from a test known to be unsuitable for detecting infection, in violation of data protection regulations, mobility restrictions in air travel but also in private transport in highly digitalized countries like China, denial of access to shops, public transport and even one's own home, all using digitally available medical data. This implementation of the classic three-part approach for managers is, first, what is the rule? Second, who monitors its implementation? And third, what is the sanction? All these points were implemented during the pandemic with the help of digital tools, initially with some difficulty, but with increasing improvement over time. The pandemic was thus used to optimize the digital agenda, particularly in the field of medicine. Regulations were communicated digitally as the constant barrage of messages, discussions about obviously pointless regulations were undermined by ever new rules or emotionally charged by presenting disaster images. Compliance with regulations, especially in the medical field, was closely monitored, even through the empowerment of lay persons such as restaurant owners or train conductors. And all that was possible due to the streamlined public, including medical doctors. While narrative critical behavior was sometimes draconically sanctioned, among other things, through digital available evidence. Here, too, as it is now also illustrated by Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s letter to the German health minister Warken, doctors and other medical personnel were particularly targeted by power-hungry state authorities. As is well known, quality assurance, which plays a very special role in medicine, includes three different criteria: structural quality, process quality, and outcome quality. All these parameters have been criminally neglected in the recent past, particularly noticeable with regard to, but not limited to, injectable substances that are still referred to as vaccines, even though they are fundamentally different in structure and design and are incapable of even remotely fulfilling the cardinal requirement of vaccinations, namely sufficient protection with acceptable side effects. It is no surprise that the COVID-19 vaccination now must be digitally documented in the electronic vaccination record in Austria, for example. The COVID-19 injection, as well as several illnesses related to COVID-19, have been assigned digital codes. ICD codes, which stands for International Classification of Diseases and Related Health Problems, both for confirmed and unconfirmed diseases. And believe it or not, there is even a specific ICD code for healthy individuals with a negative SARS-CoV-2 test. Among many other points, both the Declaration of Geneva and the Hippocratic Oath emphasize a strict relationship of trust between doctor and patient, or client, that is a healthy person in case of vaccinations and injections of this kind, which is non-negotiable. This means that every conversation is confidential, its content remains within the respective room, and this remains valid by agreement even after the death of either party. And this is precisely what is essential for medical practice. For this reason, more than a year ago, with the kind and generous support of two lawyers, one specializing in human rights and the other in data protection, I filed a complaint with the High Constitutional Court of Austria against the digital vaccination record. There has been no response to this complaint so far. However, upon inquiry, we were informed that it is unknown on which server or which the data is stored. But not only the immunization, but also the handling of all other medical data, which is the mandatory digital patient record, contradicts not only the medical oath, but also vulnerates the fundamental principles of medical ethics and data protection. The transmission of this data effectively undermines aspects of bodily integrity through the possibility of targeted coercive measures and the patient's autonomy, which is their right to self-determination. And just imagine how hacking of health data could impact families, friendships, insurance and business contracts, and occupational health, including business trips. Through digitalization, medicine thus becomes an accomplice to sometimes arbitrary and, as we have seen with the...
The interpreters are asking you to slow down a bit.
Okay, I slow down a bit. I still have time left, and I'm almost done. And as we have seen with the COVID-19 injections, also dangerous, even life-threatening mandates. Furthermore, the trail of accountability is very often lost in the digital void due to digitalization and globalization, as we are currently experiencing after the so-called COVID pandemic. But we haven't yet given up hope for a Nuremberg II trial against the decision makers who had claimed responsibility and should be charged for crimes against humanity, with digitalization be averted for use against them. Digitalization primarily serves simplification, and this also applies to surveillance and intelligence. This supports my assessment: convenience is the greatest enemy of freedom. And please just let me tell you, there is a saying that is sapere aude, which is Latin and means, please use your own brains. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Martin. Our next speaker will speak in German, so please use your headphones that you have on your seats.
You need to select the correct channel for your language. There is a button. I think it has a whatever symbol on it, I can't remember. And you can just keep pushing it until you see the language that you would like to hear it in.
German is channel 01.
No, you got it.
Yes. So, Tom Lausen, he's an IT specialist since the 1990s, former managing director of an IT consulting firm. Since 2020, he is doing independent data analysis on COVID-19, Paul-Ehrlich-Institut data, Robert Koch-Institut data, DIVI data, mortality data. Repeatedly appointed expert in the German Bundestag and state parliament hearings. Party-appointed expert before the Federal Administrative Court. Since 2025, he is a member of the Corona-related Enquete Commission at state and federal level by AfD Party. He is also the co-author of 2 Der Spiegel best-selling books. His public outreach via information channels has more than 100,000 subscribers. Thank you so much, Tom, for being here with us.
Thank you, Maria, and thank you for the translation. I will speak in German. Historische Kontrolle war immer sichtbar. Verbot, Gesetz, Polizei und digitale Steuerung ist ein wenig unsichtbarer. Tarifänderung, Priorisierung, Verzögerung, Zugangsbewertung, algorithmische Risikokorrektur. Der Mensch merkt nicht, dass er kontrolliert wird, sondern er spürt, das System selbst entscheidet immer mehr. Eine dystopische Schwelle ist aber erreicht, wenn Identität universell verknüpft ist, alle Lebensbereiche integrierbar werden und alle Entscheidungen automatisiert erfolgen und analoge Alternativen verschwinden. Freiheit wird konfiguriert, aus Freiheit wird dann Freischaltung durch Algorithmen. Das heißt, der Mensch wird vielleicht für alles eine Systemerlaubnis, eine Zugangslizenz oder einen QR-Code brauchen. Genau hier liegt für mich die infrastrukturelle Schlüsselrolle der europäischen digitalen Identität, der sogenannten EU-DI-Wallet. Für sich genommen ist sie ein technisches Werkzeug, ein digitaler Identitätsanker, gedacht und angepriesen zur Vereinfachung von Behördengängen, ganz harmlos, Vertragsabschlüssen und grenzüberschreitender Verwaltung. Doch in einer hochvernetzten Welt wird die menschliche Identität zum Knotenpunkt und alles, was an diesen Knoten angebunden ist, wird technisch und mathematisch miteinander kombinierbar. Wenn vernetzte Alltagsgeräte kontinuierlich Daten erzeugen, das Fahrzeug über Fahrverhalten und Bewegungsrouten, der Smartmeter über Energieverbrauch, die Smartwatch über Puls, Schlaf und Belastung, soziale Plattformen über Kontakte, Tonfall und Belastung beziehungsweise über Tonfall und Reaktion und unendliche weitere menschliche Vorgänge, dann entsteht eine feingliedrige digitale Spur unseres Lebens. Jede einzelne Datenspur für sich genommen mag unscheinbar wirken, technisch begrenzt und auch nur zweckgebunden. Doch die eigentliche Transformation hin zu einem neuen System beginnt dort, wo diese Spuren nicht mehr nebeneinander existieren, sondern über eine gemeinsame Identitätsinfrastruktur zusammengeführt werden. Was zuvor eigentlich fragmentiert verfügbar war, wird integrierbar. Aus einzelnen Datensätzen entsteht ein kohärentes Abbild von Verhalten, Präferenzen, Routinen und Reaktionsmustern. Dann entsteht kein bloßes Nutzerprofil mehr, sondern ein dynamisches Persönlichkeitsmodell, statistisch berechnet, laufend aktualisiert und vorausschauend interpretierbar. Nicht nur, was jemand getan hat, wird sichtbar, sondern was er wahrscheinlich in der Zukunft tun wird. Nicht nur Gewohnheiten, sondern auch Disposition. Die qualitative Neuerung liegt also nicht in der Datenerhebung selbst, sondern in der Verknüpfbarkeit. Als Programmierer und Datenanalyst weiß ich, Datenverknüpfung erzeugt nicht nur technische Möglichkeiten, sie erzeugt wirtschaftliche Begehrlichkeiten. Sobald strukturierte interoperable Identitäten existieren und Daten über APIs sauber miteinander verbunden werden können, entsteht ein neuer Rohstoff. Frische Datenkombinationen sind wie ein ungeschliffener Diamant. Wer sie zuerst erkennt, kann sie monetarisieren. Zu Geld machen. In der Digitalökonomie gilt eine einfache Wahrheit. Wo neue Datenräume entstehen, entstehen immer neue Geschäftsmodelle. Wo Profilbildung möglich ist, entsteht Scoring. Und wo Verhalten prognostizierbar wird, entsteht Risikotarifierung. Wo Muster erkennbar sind, entsteht auch ein Markt. Das ist eine einfache Wettbewerbslogik. Daraus werden Start-ups, Plattformen, Versicherungen, Fintechs, Analysefirmen, sie alle suchen nach dem nächsten verknüpfbaren Datensatz. Wer neue Zusammenhänge sieht, sieht auch Rendite. Wer Integrationsvorsprung hat, hat Marktvorsprung. Man kann das ganz gut bei dem Wunsch der Erlangung von KI Superintelligenz sehen. Der Erste, der die Superintelligenz bei der KI erreicht, wird den Markt dominieren. Wenn erst einmal eine Identitätsinfrastruktur bereitsteht, wird sie zum Träger für neue Dienste, neue Bewertungen und neue Optimierung. Die eigentliche Dynamik im digitalen Spiel kommt schon jetzt vom Markt, aus Gewinnmöglichkeiten. Und das ist in digitalen Systemen erfahrungsgemäß der stärkste Magnet. Wir Menschen produzieren jeden Tag gewaltige Mengen an Daten durch Bewegung, Kommunikation, Konsum oder Arbeit. Für KI-Systeme sind diese Daten der zentrale Rohstoff. Modelle werden nämlich genau durch unsere Daten als Trainingsmaterial besser. Und wer die Daten kontrolliert, kontrolliert die Lernfähigkeit der zukünftigen Maschinen und damit auch deren Fähigkeiten und Funktionen. Und genau hier möchte ich die Aufmerksamkeit hinlegen. Die EU versucht meines Erachtens, digitale Souveränität aufzubauen, nicht nur allein regulatorisch, sondern eben auch datenstrategisch. Ziel ist es, eigene KI-Ökosysteme mit europäischen Daten zu trainieren, statt die Wertschöpfung aus diesen Daten vollständig an US- oder chinesische Plattformen abzugeben. Daten sind das Kapital der Zukunft, aber auch schon jetzt. Eigentlich weiß das auch jeder. Aber was neu in unserem Bewusstsein ist, KI ist quasi die Veredelungsmaschine. Digitale Identität, also die EU-ID und Interoperabilität, sind die Sammelinfrastruktur. Der entscheidende Punkt ist, die EU-Wallet wäre nicht per se ein Überwachungssystem, sie ist ein Identitätsinstrument. Doch wenn sie zum universellen Authentifizierungsanker wird, ermöglicht sie Datenfusion über die Sektoren hinweg. Und genau diese sektorübergreifende Integrationsfähigkeit markiert den möglichen Kipppunkt. Die dystopische Dynamik entsteht sehr wahrscheinlich durch schrittweise Erweiterung. Komfort, Effizienz, Sicherheit. Jede Erweiterung erscheint begründet, jede Verbindung rational, bis Menschen keine Entscheidungsgewalt mehr haben. Wenn CO2-Profil, Gesundheitsprofil, Finanzprofil und Kommunikationsprofil technisch zusammenführbar sind, entsteht ein monströses Steuerungsmodell. In einem solchen System wird Freiheit nicht offen entzogen, sie wird personalisiert und dann berechnet. Wer Daten kontrolliert, kontrolliert natürlich auch die Priorisierung. Und wer Priorisierung steuert, beeinflusst natürlich auch den Zugang. Die einzelfallbezogene Zugangslizenz ist nämlich nach meinem Dafürhalten der feuchte Traum von kontrollsüchtigen Technokraten in einer neuen Gesellschaftsform. Und das ist nicht grundlos so. Wir sahen es ja bei Corona mit digitalen Zugangsrechten nach Impfung, wir haben es ja heute schon ein paar Mal gehört, ein kleiner, aber ungeheuerlicher Vorgeschmack. Die Frage im Kontext der EID ist daher überhaupt nicht, ob digitale Identität sinnvoll sein kann, sondern bleibt sie ein begrenztes Verwaltungswerkzeug oder wird sie zur integrativen Infrastruktur mit gigantischem Datensammelbecken, an die immer mehr Lebensbereiche angeschlossen werden. Solange Daten zweckgebunden bleiben, entscheiden aus digitalen Systemen menschlich überprüfbar sind und analoge Alternativen real existieren, bliebe die Balance gewahrt. Wenn jedoch Identität universell und irreversibel digital verknüpft wird, Verhalten risikobasiert bewertet und Zugriff automatisiert angepasst wird, verschiebt sich die Struktur von Freiheit grundlegend. Dann entscheidet nicht mehr das sichtbare Gesetz, dann entscheidet das System. Leider ist genau davon auszugehen wegen der vielen neuen Geschäftsmodelle. Die Dynamik ist schon jetzt real, die Unausweichlichkeit ist es aber nicht. Aber wie bringen wir das in das Bewusstsein der Menschen? Wie verlangsamt man Entwicklung, ohne sie zu verteufeln? Wie verhindert man Detail für Detail strukturelle Verschiebungen? Die Antwort oder meine Antwort lautet mit Anträgen, mit Recht, mit Präzision, mit umfangreichen textlichen Einreichungen bei Ihren Regierungen. Der erste Schritt ist Begriffsarbeit. Solange digitale Identität nur als Komfortinstrument wahrgenommen wird, fehlt die Sensibilität für ihre strukturelle Bedeutung. Bewusstsein entsteht definitiv nicht durch Alarmismus, sondern durch Klarheit. Haben Sie jemanden von den Covid-Impfungen durch Alarmismus abgehalten? Wahrscheinlich nein. Also versuchten Sie es durch Klarheit ohne Druck. Das ist der Schlüssel, kein Druck. Jeder, der dieses aktuelle Thema versteht, weiß, dass es mit der freiwilligen Zustimmung der Menschen sehr schnell geht, wie bei Corona. Deshalb wird auch hier der Trick, wie immer, die massive Propaganda sein. Millionen und Milliarden werden in die Propaganda gesteckt, um die Freiwilligkeit von ihnen zu ertricksen. Freiwilligkeit mit freiwilliger Zustimmung sind das höchste Kraftzentrum der Menschen. Die menschliche Freiwilligkeit gilt es zu beschützen. Gleichzeitig sind öffentliche Anhörungen, wissenschaftliche Gutachten, Fachgespräche im Parlament, juristische Analysen, Bildungsarbeit anzustreben, denn all das erweitert das Bewusstsein und verschließt den einfachen Zugang zur freiwilligen Zustimmung bei den Menschen. Bei allen, die es schreiben, bei allen, die es gelesen haben und bei allen, die es diskutieren. Es geht darum, nicht erst im Moment zu reagieren, wenn sich die Schlinge zuzieht, sondern frühzeitig Kriterien festzuschreiben, wie die Pandemieübungen werden nun Zustimmungsreduktionsübungen gebraucht. Und da soll man erlernen, wie man der Nudging-Architektur widerstehen kann, analog mit anderen Menschen weltweit. Transparenz ist der erste Verzögerungsmechanismus. Jede technische digitale Erweiterung muss öffentlich nachvollziehbar sein. Jede Zweckänderung muss diskutiert werden. Und jede Schnittstelle muss erklärbar sein. Verzögerungen entstehen durch Verfahren, durch Prüfpflichten, durch Evaluationsklauseln und durch Sunset-Klauseln, die automatischen Ausläufe vorsehen, sonst keine Zustimmung. Aber ganz besonders sind verpflichtende Folgenabschätzungen bei jeder Erweiterung der Identitätsverknüpfung. Durch Datenschutzfolgenabschätzungen, die nicht nur formell, sondern inhaltlich ernst genommen werden, durch das Prinzip keine sektorübergreifende Datenfusion ohne explizite parlamentarische Zustimmung und auch nicht ohne die Zustimmung der Menschen. Konkrete Anträge können auf Detailebene ansetzen. Verankerung des Rechts auf analoge Alternativen bei allen staatlichen Leistungen. Verbot sektorübergreifender Identitätsverknüpfung ohne Einzelgesetz. Verpflichtende menschliche Letztentscheidung bei jeder automatisierten Zugriffsbeschränkung. Transparenzpflichten für algorithmische Risikomodelle. Dokumentations- und Benachrichtigungspflichten bei jeder einzelnen Datenweitergabe. Und natürlich eine Evaluationsberichtspflicht in festen Zeitabständen. Und auch ein immer geltendes Austrittsrecht aus digitalen Identitätssystemen ohne Nachteil als Ewigkeitsrecht. Ein systematischer Ansatz liegt bereits in der Idee eines analogen Zugangsgrundrechtes, wie es im Entwurf zum analogen Zugangsgrundrecht AZG unter analogfreedom.eu beschrieben ist. Entscheidend ist dabei nicht die große symbolische Forderung, sondern die operative Struktur. Gleichstellung analoger und digitaler Verfahren. Verbot indirekter Nötigung, also dem berühmten Nudging. Einem Schutz vor algorithmischer Alleinentscheidung, menschliche Überprüfbarkeit und die infrastrukturelle Sicherung analoger Alternativen. Detailverhinderung bedeutet nicht das Gesamtsystem angreifen, sondern jede einzelne Erweiterung prüfen, jede neue Verknüpfung braucht Begründung. Jede Krisenmaßnahme braucht klare Begrenzung und jede Schnittstelle braucht Rechtsgrundlage. Das dauert. Bewusstsein verbreitet sich am wirksamsten dort, wo konkrete Szenarien verständlich werden. Nicht abstrakte Begriffe wie Überwachung, sondern präzise Fragen. Was passiert, wenn CO2-Profil und Mobilitätszugang technisch kombinierbar wird? Was geschieht, wenn Gesundheitsdaten in Risikotarife einfließen? Und was bedeutet es, wenn Identität zur universellen Authentifizierungsbasis wird? Diese Fragen müssen sachlich gestellt werden als Regierungsproblem. Verzögerung ist dabei kein blockierendes Fortschritts, sie ist Sorgfalt, die Menschenleben und Menschlichkeit vor einem Digitalstaat rettet. Demokraten arbeiten mit Zeit. Komplexe Technik darf nicht schneller sein als politische Reflexion. Letztlich entscheidet die kulturelle Ebene. Wenn Bürger analoge Alternativen nutzen, wenn Institutionen analoge Infrastruktur erhalten, wenn Gerichte algorithmische Alleinentscheidungen korrigieren und wenn Parlamentarier Änderungsanträge einbringen, dann bleibt das System offen, analog und menschlich verhandelbar. Der entscheidende Hebel liegt nicht im Widerstand gegen Existenz digitaler Identität, sondern im Widerstand gegen ihre unbemerkte, rasante Übernahme aller Lebensbereiche. So wird nicht Technologie bekämpft, sondern ihre strukturelle Entgrenzung demokratisch begrenzt. Und genau dort beginnt die verantwortliche politische Arbeit. Wenn wir wirklich Bewusstsein schaffen wollen, beginnt das nicht im digitalen Raum. Es beginnt in echter Begegnung, Analoge Treffen sind gerade kein nostalgischer Rückschritt, sondern ein Schutzraum für Denken. Sie können sich alle schon einmal darauf freuen, wenn tausende Roboter auf der Straße rumlaufen. Spätestens dann wünschen sie sich, dass sie mal unter Menschen sind. Und damit fangen wir nun an. In einer Welt, in der nahezu jede Kommunikation speicherbar, auswertbar und kontextlos reproduzierbar ist, verändert sich auch das Denken selbst. Menschen sprechen anders, wenn sie wissen, dass jedes Wort potenziell aufgezeichnet, analysiert oder öffentlich zirkuliert werden kann. Deshalb braucht es Räume, in denen Gedanken wieder unfertig sein dürfen, in denen Hypothesen entwickelt, Zweifel formuliert und Perspektiven offen diskutiert werden können, ohne dauerhafte Datenspur. Der erste Schritt ist daher die bewusste Einführung analoger Zusammenkünfte, Treffen ohne digitale Geräte mit Aufnahmefunktion, keine Smartphones auf dem Tisch, keine verdeckten Mitschnitte, keine automatischen Transkriptionsdienste, keine Roboter, keine Sensorik, keine KI-gestützte Protokollierung, nicht aus Technikfeindlichkeit, sondern um die unmittelbare Menschlichkeit zu schützen. Stimme, Mimik, Zwischentöne, Vertrauen. Ein solcher Raum ist kein geheimer Zirkel, er ist ein Denkraum, ein Raum, in dem Argumente nicht performativ für eine spätere Verwertung formuliert werden, sondern ehrlich für das Gegenüber. Dort können Detailfragen zur digitalen Identität, zu Schnittstellen, zu rechtlichen Freiheiten, zu möglichen Entwicklungen in Ruhe und ohne digitalen Druck besprochen werden. Analoge Gespräche fördern Komplexität, Differenzierung und gegenseitiges Zuhören und Wahrnehmen. Der bewusste Verzicht auf Foto- und Audioaufzeichnung ist dabei ein Vertrauenssignal. Gedanken sind in der Entstehung verletzlich. Eine Gesellschaft, die nur noch auf dokumentierte Kommunikation setzt, verliert Räume für Irrtum und Korrektur. Analoges Zusammenkommen ist daher selbst ein menschlicher Akt im Sinne von Selbstvergewisserung. Es geht darum, die kulturelle Grundlage zu erhalten, auf der später juristische Anträge, parlamentarische Initiativen und konkrete Änderungsvorschläge entstehen. Das Analoge ist kein Ersatz für das Digitale, sondern dessen Korrektiv. Wer nur digital kommuniziert, denkt zunehmend in digitalen Kategorien. Wer sich analog trifft, erinnert sich daran, dass der Mensch nicht Datensatz, sondern Gegenüber ist. Die Menschlichkeit bleibt dort, wo Begegnung unmittelbar ist, wo kein Algorithmus mithört, wo kein Profil entsteht und wo ein Gedanke nicht sofort bewertet wird, gespeichert und gescored, sondern verstanden wird. Bewusstsein entsteht durch Begegnung, entsteht durch Sorgfalt und Schutz entsteht durch klare Regeln. Und all das beginnt paradoxerweise ganz analog. Vielen Dank.
Thank you very much, Tom. Our next speaker, if I may say that, the youngest in our group, Montgomery Toms. He's a British freedom campaigner, waking young minds up to authoritarianism and challenging government overreach. He is also the founder of Freedom Watch GB, the fastest growing youth-focused freedom movement in Great Britain. Thank you for being here.
It's a pleasure, and thank you very much for inviting me. So, I've written some notes, and I'm just going to speak on quite spontaneously. So, the last time I was here, actually, Digital ID had recently been announced in, Great Britain, and I briefly touched on it and explained how, we're going to be fighting it and we won't be going along with it. Now, Keir Starmer, our great Prime Minister, went forward with, I think at the time it was his 13th U-turn, and said they're no longer going to bring it in. But I can tell you there's absolute nonsense. And it's interesting because listening to other speakers here talking about all the things that I was talking about when I was last here about, mission creep and social credit systems. Well, the mandated aspect of it coming through the front door and being so obvious that it's here is actually the easiest kind of way of looking at it. Because I can tell you from the experience of what we're dealing with in Britain, it's far more sneaky and through the back door. So what's happening is they've U-turned on mandated digital ID. So it's not coming in, we win. Not the case in any sense. There are multiple ways that they are bringing this through the back door. So I'll give you a few. For example, if you're a company director in England now, or Britain, you are required to sign up to something called One Login. Now, that all sounds nice on the face of it, but quite simply, that is a centralised login portal for you to be able to run a limited company. You won't be able to be self-employed unless you sign up to One Login. Now, One Login is incredibly insecure in the sense that it's based on foreign Romanian technology originally. It's been red team tested, so they've put it through basically a process where they put friendly hackers in there to see if they can break in. Lo and behold, guess what? They broke in without even being noticed, so that's what our data's being held on. But it goes even more sinister than that. Digital veteran cards, digital driving licenses, all things that at the moment are optional. But like we saw during the lockdowns, like we saw during COVID times, we didn't technically have vaccine passports mandated in every single location in England or Scotland, Wales, etc. But some venues chose to have vaccine passports in the same sense that venues may turn around and say, OK, well, you've got to use only card here and you can't use cash. Now, technically, they've not implemented that by law, but naturally speaking, people are going to be forced and gradually kind of edged in the direction of just going, well, it's more convenient, as we've seen touched on down this panel, about how it's more convenient, and that is, convenience is the word they always try to use. They use it during lockdown. Another more concerning one. The Children Wellbeings and Schools Bill is another thing that they're pushing through. This is essentially where they say that if you want to homeschool your children, they will have to have a digital ID. And what they're doing is they're automatically transferring NHS numbers into lifelong IDs for children. Get them young, right? And then that way they grow into it. And what is homeschooling? Oh, well, it's you escaping from state indoctrination, if you ask me, and having the autonomy and freedom to bring up your children the way you see fit. Of course, cracks down on freedom. The reason I'm mentioning these very specific examples is we've seen a so-called U-turn. Okay, so we've been through the process already of them implementing it or trying to, saying it's going to be mandated for your right to work. But they U-turned on it, and I can tell you it's still very much here. So it's the responsibility of lots of people that are obviously that don't live in Britain to really do some thorough research as to what their government is pushing through the back door, and it's far more sinister and far more sneaky. And obviously there is a bigger picture. In London we've got, specifically London, it's being rolled up and down Britain. We've got facial recognition rolled out up and down the city. If you've committed an offence and they're looking for you, they will scan thousands upon thousands upon thousands of face to pick up a few wanted people. Now, it's all about the motivation. For example, at some point, I'm sure I'm going to be wanted, right? Recently, I'm under investigation for being offensive, in a public space. I could walk into London. They want me for committing what they would claim to be a hate crime. They use facial recognition. They scan me. They connect it to my digital ID. It links into that same idea of mission creep, social credit system. London is likened to China in the level of surveillance that we have. We're more surveilled in London than any other city in Europe. We are really... England leads on many things, right? But we're leading on this one, I think, and that's not exactly a very good thing, right? We've got intelligence services, things that we don't know what's going on behind closed doors. 77th Brigade is another example, literally an investigation unit that used to track our tweets, our posts during the lockdown days. If they had a digital ID, if they had access to every inch of information in our life, God knows what kind of power that's going to deliver to the state. They've got files on us, databases, and as I reiterate, lessons from COVID, vaccine passports, we've seen it already. That's what I mentioned last time I was here. It was the blueprint for exactly what we're seeing now. Now, I'm not sure, is this my timer? I'm just checking. Yes. All right, so I'm all doing okay for time. So the next thing is, what can we do about it? I suppose that's the question that gets thrown at me a lot is, what's the actual solution here? Because all the things that I've laid out, they all sound really scary. And quite honestly, it's a question that I find really difficult to answer. There are clever ways to get around One Login. For example, you can rely on your accountant to sign up on your behalf, but, it doesn't really solve the problem, does it? The honest truth is we're in a situation in England where people don't realise that it's a digital ID. People don't realise the actual motivations behind One Login, and people are just falling into this trap. They're being forced to do it. Imagine you build up a company of 30 years. Oh well, just sign up to One Login. People are just naturally going along with it. It comes down to mass non-compliance. I always make the point, there's not enough rooms in the prison. If they were to bring it in, if everyone was to not comply, then they would have to lock us all up. And I can tell you they're not going to be wanting to do that. So The solution is raising awareness on the ground, talking to as many people as possible. I do my absolute best to network with young people. I debate young people on digital ID and censorship and free speech and all the other issues which we could delve into, which I'm sure you're all very familiar with. And I do my best to wake people up to essentially be vigilant and to catch it before it comes in. But there's no easy answer to how you escape digital ID. When it comes down to it, we can talk about it's coming, it's coming. Well, in England, it has come, and we're seeing it be implemented, as I say, through the back door. And it's our responsibility, as has been referenced here many times, to repost, to just do everything you can. Outreach, talk to people, social media. I mean, I use it, but ultimately, I think one of the best strategies is grassroots work, going to the people, going to your local communities, talking to your neighbour, handing out leaflets. It's your responsibility. It's everyone's responsibility. But it's not to rely on any form of a political party or in its entirety. However, that does bring me on to an interesting next point. We've got absolute turmoil in the political world in England. I'm sure many people in this room have heard of Nigel Farage and the Reform Party. Now, some people may agree with me or disagree with me on that, but it's in recent sort of months that I have completely lost all faith in the Reform Party and Nigel Farage. I don't think that they have what it takes to actually put an end to this kind of madness. For example, many people in this room, of course, will be familiar with the vaccine passports and the vaccine mandates. Well, it would be interesting, if you guys didn't know this, that Reform welcomed with open arms Nadim Zahawi, the man who brought in vaccine passports, vaccine mandates. That man was welcomed with open arms into what is supposed to be the future government of Great Britain. Well, I don't think they are going to be the future government, and I think that if we have enough strength in people and we have enough time, then the new proposed political party might be the method of breaking open that kind of brutal two-party system. That party is Restore Britain. Of course, I'm going to be biased. I recently got involved with Restore Britain. I can tell you that the policy from Restore Britain is quite transparent. It would be to scrap the mandated aspect of one login enforcement and, most importantly, protect choice and protect your right to live offline. Obviously, that goes into cash, that goes into rejecting, CBDCs, that goes into rejecting a social credit system in its entirety. Guarantee access to services without digital verification, provide clear physical documentation alternatives, stop the expansion of digital wallets, that's another one, as I mentioned, digital veteran cards, digital driving licences, repeal the children's digital ID through the NHS being automatically transferred, as I mentioned earlier, ban facial recognition in public spaces, roll back on mass surveillance, and ultimately just restore freedom, which seems sort of like a distant idea, but that is what I believe is our best opportunity if you're looking for in a direction to vote, if you're going to be living in England. Reform Party, I don't think they have what it takes. But ultimately, as I mentioned, that I made that point from saying don't rely on just a political force and a political party, and I think that's absolutely fundamental. We do see this temptation to offload responsibility, even amongst those that champion freedom the most. And I say to every single one of you in here and anyone that's watching this video, take responsibility for yourself, your local communities, and as I said, do everything you possibly can to outreach and tell people what is happening. And even if that means feeling lost or isolated or lonely or cut out, because I can think everybody here has probably had lost somebody close to them through their political beliefs. I wouldn't even call them political, I would just call them principled reality checks, right? But ultimately, it is difficult. But we are at a T-junction, especially in Britain. We are at that. We are dealing with digital ID. It is here. I'm not even talking about how it's coming. It's arrived. It's being implemented in a very, very sneaky way. So what do? I go up and down Britain. I debate with university students, for example, and I can tell you, debating digital ID and one login is one of the most boring things you can possibly do. It's not interesting, and I don't enjoy sat there going, well, do you know about digital ID? But it's fundamental because we've got to safeguard our freedom. We've got to safeguard Britain, the world, Europe. I know that one of the few good things that we have in England is the fact that, as I say, Britain, the fact we have Brexit. Though we did copy and paste majority of Europeans' legislation, it's pretty much useless. But at least our passports are a different colour. But anyway. what we don't have to deal with is the digital euro. Is another, but we still are dealing with, the constant erosion of cash. And we do need to support each other internationally, and that's why I think this has been an amazing space, an amazing forum, and as I say, an absolute pleasure. Thank you for inviting me to come and speak. But my message really is simple. I don't want to go on some convoluted, I've tried my best to obviously give the gist and break down the detailed backdoor aspects to digital ID, is get up, keep fighting, resist at all costs. There's not enough space in the prisons. Rely on young people, okay? Young people know that something is wrong. The problem is, no one wants to give them the reason why something is wrong. They are told it's man-made climate change, for example. We're all parasites. We all need to die. We're carbon, remove carbon. Obviously, we're made of carbon. They're told that they need to take jabs. They're told that they need about convenience all the time. Well, why aren't people of older generations providing that alternative, that message and that energy to say no? If there's 1 million people telling you you have to say yes, you are very capable of saying no. It's about offering a space, a lifeline, and a unified voice where young people don't feel threatened and terrified to speak up. Because I can tell you, and I'll finish up on this, that in my experience, I was very young when the lockdowns hit, and I refused to wear a mask, I refused to take a test, I refused to take the so-called vaccines. I refused to social distance, go along with any of the mandates, and through that, I was massively isolated. I went to university. I lasted 3 weeks because they told me to put a pronoun badge on, and I told them to stick it up. I don't want to swear. Sorry, that was a bit rude. But I told them to stick it where the sun don't shine right. I didn't subscribe to anything that they have put forward, which I know is fundamentally Orwellian and wrong, because ultimately 2 + 2 = 4, not 5. And we need to drive that message and let young people know that they are capable, they do know something's wrong. Let's provide them the answer as to what that problem actually is, rather than what the education system is proposing. And maybe, just maybe, you can rely on young people to drive the foundation of the Western world to be something that's free, prosperous, and away from this Orwellian enslavement. So thank you very much, and it's a pleasure. Thank you for having me here. Thank you. I appreciate that. 12 minutes. Boom.
Thank you very much, Montgomery Toms, also known as Monty. So what I want to state for Make Europe Healthy again, the beautiful thing about our organization is that we are not linked to one political party. We are non-political. We are working with politicians from various political parties. And the great thing is that we can show the citizens and the voters for them that those amazing politicians are willing to come together when it comes to the common denominators, health and peace, and this is beautiful. And so there are good things about other parties in the UK. There are very good things about uprising new parties, or also, as Monty mentioned, grassroots movements. I'm a big supporter of grassroots movement, and I organized very big rallies back in Austria during COVID times. So please, grassroots movement people around the world, keep doing what you're doing. Take a stance, even if you're the first one, and then you become a bigger group and inform the people around you. Thank you again for your amazing statement. I saw one video of Montgomery Toms on Instagram back in the days, reached out to my friend then Estienne Gregory, who is also a steering committee member of MEHA, and I said, I need to get in contact with this young gentleman. Very, very well spoken. Thank you so much for that. And now we come to our next speaker. Last but definitely not least, my dear friend, also MEHA steering committee member, a lawyer from the Netherlands, Meike Terhorst. She's an attorney at law in Alkmaar, the Netherlands. Meike started working in 1993 as a commercial lawyer for Clifford Chance in Amsterdam and London, and continued after 2000 in the non-commercial field, working for psychiatrist patients, which is very important, children, very important, women, and Earth and the NGO Earth Netherlands. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your support. Looking forward to your speech, Meike. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Maria, and thank you, Christine Anderson, for hosting this important event, and I feel very honored to be here. In my presentation on the legal aspects, I will give 3 tips. The first one is the digital ID and its grid are a system. So the digital ID will become a digital twin of you. The European Union does not have the legal power to impose this ID system because the EU is not a state or a country. The EU can't sit on the chair of the member states. Therefore, member states can refuse to implement the digital ID. And I hope really that this happens. And for EU citizens, my advice is to not keep a digital ID if you have one, just dump it. The second point, the digital ID is not issued by the EU or your governments, but by a cartel of banks and big tech companies. This means that when you download your digital ID, you do this at your own risk. The digital ID exceeds, goes above the legal system and the political system. Each MEP and judge is also subject to the ID. So,
Meike, do you have the clicker for your presentation? Wonderful.
Yeah. And the third one is the digital ID is implemented using censorship and propaganda, using the corporate media. We should never accept the censorship and also not the one-sided propaganda. If we can stop the censorship and propaganda machine, it will be very hard for the cartel to implement the digital ID. Okay. Is this? Yeah, okay.
And Meike, if you could come a little, I'm probably too close, sorry, but if you could come a little closer and I a little further away, then it's perfect. Thank you.
Hear
yes.
Me? Yeah. Maybe like this. Yeah. Okay. There are 3 regulations implementing the ID, the wallet, and the regulation for uploading your medical records. Here you can see how the digital medical data work. Your data can be accessed by your physician and also by Big Pharma and your government. When you upload your medical data, you will probably be unable to claim doctor-patient confidentiality. And when the government can access your medical data, this can be used against you. Tip number 1, let us realize that the EU is not a country or a state and does not have the legal right to issue an ID. Member states can refuse to implement the digital ID, and their cooperation is necessary because the member states need to hand over the personal numbers of each of their citizens to the cartel so all systems can be connected. So it's not even legal to do this. It's like as a person you should give consent to transfer your records, and this is not done. Who built the digital ID in the system? This was done by a group called ID 2020. Who are involved with ID 2020? This is the Rockefeller Foundation, Microsoft, Accenture, and so on. The EU played a crucial role for the implementation of the digital ID, and you can see this is a project called Roadmap to the implementation of the digital vaccination card, which was launched in 2018, so right before the pandemic. You might ask why the EU played such a crucial role. Well, this was because the EU has been taken over by a group of banks and investors based on the Canada-Europe Trade Agreement, CETA, in 2016. It is revealing how the politicians smile, knowing that even more money will flow to the cartel and into their own pockets. What do we know about the cartel? The ID 2020 has been chipping babies in Bangladesh and also in Kenya with a proof of vaccination chip. I consider this an absolute crime against humanity. Chipping Chipping strips persons of their dignity and their human rights. What happens in Africa today is planned to happen all over the world. The fear is that nobody can stop the cartel at this point because they have become too powerful. Our politicians are working for the cartel as their employees. Here you can see that also the EU has done a study in 2017 on the chipping of workers. I think this is a clear example of EU crossing a red line. Tip number 2, the digital ID is issued by a cartel of banks and big tech, not by your government or EU. The cartel does not respect human dignity. When you download your digital ID and hand over all your most precious details, in my view, you do not have the protection of the law or your political system. As a lawyer, my advice is not to take out or keep a digital ID because it's a trap and you're not protected. The digital ID is marketed using a worldwide media strategy. Okay. The sound.
Maybe, Monty, you can take your microphone and start it. Your microphone, Monty, and then and then turn it over to Meike.
No, the sound of the
oh,
video.
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
Can you put? Yeah, this and then.
They're seeing how many people in that household and they're vaccinating everyone who's eligible in that home while they knock on that door.
We blijven vaccineren. Dat doen we wijk voor wijk, deur voor deur, arm voor arm.
To get more Americans vaccinated. One, targeted community by community, door to door.
Rapidly vaccinate those eager to get their first shot and their second shot for that matter if they need a second. Now we need to go to community by community, neighborhood by neighborhood. And oftentimes door to door, literally knocking on doors.
Minister L. Murugan has inaugurated and inspected door-to-door vaccination drive in Chennai.
In Wilcannia, for example, our AusMat team has been going door to door and having those conversations directly with people and offering the vaccine.
They're going to be going suburb to suburb, street to street, door to door, knocking on these and actively looking for people who are in the wrong house and finding them on the spot.
Yeah, look, absolutely.
And what was so incredible is these teams are not just knocking on doors anymore, they're actually carrying ESPs and vaccinating at the door. They're seeing how many people in that household and they're vaccinating everyone who's eligible in that home while they knock on that door.
I still find it shocking that in Australia and Canada, during the pandemic, people have been vaccinated against their will. I was told that it were Aboriginals in Australia and Indians in Canada. They were hunted down like animals. And this shows what the cartel is capable of doing. The cartel and the EU censor us working together. During the pandemic, we had the Trusted News Initiative working with the European Broadcasting Union. We had the roadmap to the digital vaccination card that we just discussed. And in the Netherlands, we had the think tank Disinformation. The think tank, we learned about it afterwards. In the Netherlands, representatives of all government bodies work together secretly with Google and Facebook to censor any information opposing the narrative. So this means we were not told that COVID-19 could be treated with medicine like ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine. And we're also not told that there were many side effects to the vaccine and even deaths. Also, and this was through a client of mine, in the Netherlands we found out that parts of the government, the corporate media and even the Dutch courts were part of a censorship network working behind the Twitter handle @thematicEU. And this is an EU program. Very shocking that the courts are part of it. And this, maybe there's no surprise because most court cases were lost during COVID-19. Tomorrow, we'll have a court case in the Netherlands, in The Hague, against the Dutch courts, because independent journalists are no longer allowed to film court cases unless they have a press card with income and job requirements. This press card requirement supports corporate journalism and stops the work of new independent media journalists. If this case is not successful, we have lost our right to independent court reporting. Tip number 3, counter censorship by actively looking for independent media and whistleblowers. If the chipping of babies is already done today, what will happen tomorrow? It is not hard to imagine a world where humanity is stripped of all human rights and we will live under a system of total control. In my view, we can stop this if and only if we can work together. We need to support our brave friends who spoke out before and paid a very high price for this. My dear German colleague, Dr. Rainer Füllmich, is already more than 2.5 years in prison. My Dutch dear colleague, Arno van Kessel, is out of prison, awaiting his trial with an electronic anklet. In my opinion, both Rainer and Arno are punished for searching for the truth. A truth that is very inconvenient. It touches me deeply that honest and brave people can end up in jail for speaking the truth. Together, we can face this truth. Together, we can work towards a positive outcome, because love is the most powerful force in the universe. Do something. Start small. This is a picture of a court case that we started against the Minister of Health with 10 teenagers and children. We were standing there in the rain, and it was a very dreadful moment. It's very easy and appealing to remain a spectator. We need to act because our most precious values are on the line. Please make your voice be heard so we can become a large group of well-informed people that can protect together our rights and freedoms. Thank you, Christine. Thank you all for listening.
So we have a couple of minutes left, and we also have in the room with us Professor Dr. Christian Perronne from France, and the interpreters are still here. So Christian, if you want to speak in French for 3 minutes, it's possible to speak en français or English, whatever you prefer. Thank you so much.
Ok. Merci beaucoup, Maria. Merci à tous. Parce que je sais que les interprètes doivent partir bientôt, mais sinon je continuerai en anglais. Donc, je vais vous donner en quelques minutes ce qui se passe en France. D'abord, la censure d'Internet est quelque chose qui maintenant est un problème récurrent. Plusieurs médias alternatifs ont été interdits en France, notamment avec la guerre en Ukraine, mais il y a d'autres sujets. Il y a eu des menaces contre ex-Twitter, parce que la police a fait une perquisition dans les locaux de Twitter récemment pour menacer Elon Musk. Le gouvernement travaille sur la mise en place du contrôle d'identité pour se connecter aux réseaux sociaux. Et ça a commencé récemment, maintenant c'est obligatoire. Le prétexte, c'était pour les jeunes, les enfants qui voulaient se connecter sur les sites pornographiques avec un âge inférieur à 15 ans. Ça peut être une mesure respectable, mais il peut y avoir aussi un contrôle parental qui soit fait différemment. Mais maintenant, même un adulte qui va sur ces sites est obligé de décliner son identité. Et en fait, on s'aperçoit que c'est un prétexte, parce que beaucoup de parents étaient d'accord pour faire ça. Mais on va évoluer vers un contrôle de toute la population pour tous les sites, même s'ils ne sont pas du tout pornographiques. Donc je suis d'accord qu'on lutte contre la pornographie chez les enfants, mais là, cette histoire est quand même un petit peu... C'est quand même bizarre. Alors, en France, il y a beaucoup de fuites de données informatiques à répétition. Il y a des pirates informatiques qui ont obtenu de la part de millions de Français les numéros des comptes bancaires, les numéros fiscaux, les informations personnelles sur les sites privés, publics, des données médicales sensibles. Il y a selon les données officielles, il y a 11 à 15 millions de Français dont les données médicales ont été violées. Et il y a en fait des données officielles de la Commission nationale sur l'informatique et la liberté placent notre pays, la France, en tête des nations européennes touchées par ce problème. Et récemment, il a été signalé 6 929 violations des données informatiques. Donc le gouvernement exige de plus en plus de données personnelles, mais n'assure pas la sécurité de ces données. Et un exemple, à l'hôpital, j'ai vécu ça. Maintenant, toutes les données sont informatisées pour chaque malade. Il y avait un exemple qui était assez triste il y a quelques années, où un professeur de médecine connu, je ne citerai pas son nom, dans une grande ville de France, dans un hôpital universitaire, était hospitalisé pour une maladie grave. Et quand il est allé mieux dans sa chambre d'hôpital, il a pu se connecter et voir qui avait eu accès à son dossier médical. Bon, c'était l'ancien doyen de la faculté de médecine. La moitié des étudiants en médecine de la faculté s'étaient connectés sur son dossier personnel. Donc il n'y a aucune sécurité, même vis-à-vis des compagnies d'assurance, etc. Donc, en France, la violation du secret médical est devenue universelle. Vous savez que notre gouvernement a donné les données médicales des Français à Microsoft Azure aux États-Unis. Et en plus, c'est la France qui paye Microsoft pour gérer les idées. Je pensais que Microsoft allait acheter les données françaises. Donc on paye, c'est complètement fou. C'est le Health Data Hub. Donc les données sont transférées sans consentement. Le secret médical est brisé. Ça pose des problèmes aux assurances. Donc c'est une rupture du secret médical. Donc le gouvernement essaye de progresser vers un identifiant centralisé unique, informatique. Mais c'est une aubaine pour les pirates informatiques et ce sera beaucoup plus facile d'avoir ces données. Donc, officiellement, on dit que ces données personnelles, c'est super, c'est pour simplifier les démarches. Mais demain, on va aller vers le contrôle social, comme en Chine, vers la notation des citoyens, les bons citoyens, les mauvais citoyens à qui on pourra couper le compte bancaire, comme ça s'est fait ailleurs, la restriction d'accès à tel ou tel service. Et en France, les données sont non transparentes. Il y a des données au ministère sur la mortalité des Français pendant le Covid qui ont été inoculés ou pas par ce soi-disant vaccin Covid. Ils ont tous les chiffres. Avec plein d'autres experts, on les a demandé de plusieurs années. Ils ont refusé, en disant on n'a pas les données. Et récemment, au mois de décembre 2025, un groupe d'experts aux ordres du gouvernement a publié dans le JAMA, le Journal of American Medical Association, un article disant qu'en France, la vaccination avait été géniale, avait protégé plein de vies. On a la preuve avec des experts, on a réanalysé l'article, que c'était complètement faux. Donc ils utilisent les bases de données, ils ne veulent pas les rendre publiques parce qu'on n'a pas accès pour vérifier les données. Et ils publient dans des grands journaux. Alors, on est un petit peu en conflit actuellement avec le JAMA, avec un groupe d'amis experts, pour essayer de faire éclore la vérité, mais le journal se réfugie derrière l'indépendance éditoriale. Bon, en plus, toutes ces données, le fait que tout soit informatisé, ça conduit à l'exclusion, à la discrimination de ceux qui n'ont pas de smartphone, qui n'ont pas d'Internet, qui n'ont pas de compétences numériques. Et moi, je le vois même dans la région où j'habite, les personnes âgées sont perdues, ne peuvent plus communiquer avec leur banque parce qu'ils ont fermé les agences bancaires. Donc les gens peuvent être exclus de droits fondamentaux. Et puis, il n'y a pas de transparence ni de recours. Qui contrôle les algorithmes? Qui audite les accès aux données? Où va l'historique des connexions? On n'a aucune donnée. Alors en France, on a soi-disant la Commission nationale informatique et liberté, qui au départ était une très bonne création, qui devrait être indépendante, mais en fait, elle n'ose pas aller contre le gouvernement. Et en plus, dans ses statuts, elle n'a pas le droit de condamner le gouvernement. Elle peut condamner des entreprises privées. Donc, quand le gouvernement fait des choses illicites, elle peut juste donner un signal ou une alerte, mais ça ne va pas plus loin. Voilà, donc, comme ça a été évoqué tout à l'heure, d'ailleurs, on l'a vu en France parce qu'on avait fait une action auprès du Conseil constitutionnel lors des élections. on savait que les machines à voter, les machines électroniques n'avaient pas été gérées de façon légale, mais le Conseil constitutionnel a quand même validé les élections. Donc il y a maintenant un risque démocratique, puisque les votes électroniques peuvent conduire à des résultats d'élections truqués. Donc voilà, il est essentiel pour moi d'appeler un moratoire sur le déploiement obligatoire du portefeuille d'identité numérique sans avoir des garanties très strictes. Voilà, je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup, Professor Dr. Christian Perronne. Because I asked you to speak, I just heard from the head of the interpreters that they are still here with us in the room till 7:30. So I missed out on the chance to introduce you, Professor Dr. Perronne. He's a retired professor of infectious diseases from the University of Versailles, Paris-Saclay. He had high responsibilities within head of medical department in the University Hospital, Institut Pasteur Paris, College of the French Professors of Infectious and Tropical Diseases, National Immunization Technical Advisory Group, French Drug Agency, Superior Council for Public Hygiene in France, High Council for Public Health, INSERM, French National Institute for Health and Medical Research, National Council of Universities, and the European Technical Advisory Group of Experts on Immunization and the WHO. Again, merci beaucoup. And I also am happy to be able to announce that Professor Perronne is supporting the MEHA Executive Board as Chief Medical and Scientific Director. And I also want to take the opportunity to welcome my Executive Board members, Elaine Mullally from Ireland, as well as Paola Pansera from Italy, and Vice President of Make Europe Healthy again from Iceland, Arnar Jonsson. Thank you for being here, and thank you to everybody who came from various parts of Europe to be here with us today. Thank you, Christine, first and foremost.
Yeah, thank you so much, speakers on the panel. Before we go to Q&A, I would very much like to give the senator from the Irish Parliament an opportunity to say a few words. If you could please stick to your speaking time, like 5 minutes, if that's okay. And I would ask Elaine Mullally to briefly introduce her. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all the speakers this afternoon. It was very, very interesting and very informative. So just before I introduce Senator Sharon Keogan, I just want to make one point, and that is, you know, I know every country thinks that they're the outlier in relation to what's coming down the line, but in Ireland we take the presidency of the European Council, the Council of the European Union, in July of this year, and already we have our Taoiseach Simon Harris, who has said that Ireland is preparing to champion...
Could you slow down a little bit?
Oh, okay. Ireland is preparing to champion identity rules and strong protections against online abuse and disinformation. So we're already getting ready to stop free speech, to stop any dissent, to block anybody that wants to challenge the government in particular. And like most other countries, our media is bought by the government. So the only opportunity that we have at the moment of getting free speech out is through social media, and they're obviously going to try and target that. So I'm not taking up any more time. There are 13 countries represented here this afternoon, and I would like to take the opportunity to thank each and every one of you for making the journey. There's 15 from Ireland, and Senator Sharon Keogan, who's sitting to my right here, is one of the very few politicians in Ireland who stands up and speaks out for the people of Ireland. So I want to welcome you personally, Sharon, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Elaine, and thank you, Christine, for the invitation this afternoon. So in recent weeks, many people will have heard about the very large leak of government-held personal information in Mexico. It affected millions of people. 150 gigabytes of data was stolen. This included documents relating to 195 million taxpayer records, voter records and the government employee credentials. Now, Mexico may be far away from us, but there is no far away in the digital world. So the lessons this offers us is very close to home. As more countries move towards digital ID systems and centralised digital records, the stakes around information security grow. And in an era shaped by AI, where digital systems are probed, copied and tested constantly, it is becoming harder, not easier, to guarantee that any system is completely safe. What's even more interesting in the Mexico case, the hackers didn't breach the government databases themselves. They got a publicly available AI model to do it. And the way they did this was simply by asking the AI over and over again until it accepted and proceeded to hack the Mexican government over the course of a month. So I want to speak about digital ID in a way that simply looks at the practical realities. Digital ID, at its core, is a centralised holding place for personal information. So when something goes wrong, as we saw in Mexico, the consequences fall not onto governments or agencies, but onto ordinary people who find their private information unexpectedly exposed. My concern is not necessarily with digital tools themselves, but with this growing assumption held by bureaucrats and politicians that every aspect of our personal identity should be stored in a single online system, accessible across platforms and agencies. Digital systems can certainly be helpful, but they ultimately concentrate risk. Because while a big part of the digitalisation push certainly seems to be driven by people interested in controlling others, I think what's more worrying is how it's driven by the sheer naivety of so many leaders who just seem to think digital equals modern and good. Because in the AI era, where large data sets can be copied, analysed and breached more quickly and creatively than before, this naivety makes us sitting ducks. That said, it is also important to acknowledge that some forms of digital verification are not only useful but necessary. At our borders, for example, storing biometric data such as fingerprints can play an important role in managing attempted illegal entries. This kind of information, kept for a specific purpose and under strict safeguards, allows the state to identify individuals who are repeatedly attempting to evade immigration controls. In those cases, digital tools gives us accuracy, clarity and a way to protect the integrity of our borders. So the question is not whether digital systems are good or bad. The real question is how we use them and where we draw sensible boundaries. A universal digital ID, one system holding most of a person's important information, brings serious risks. This is especially the case when breaches can now happen at a scale that was difficult to imagine even a decade ago. A more balanced approach is to use digital verification where it provides clear benefits while avoiding unnecessary centralisation of sensitive information. What happened in Mexico is a reminder that really nothing is safe when it is online. Even well-resourced governments can't secure their large data sets. It is a reminder to proceed carefully, to ensure that the systems we build protect people rather than expose them. But I think it's also a reminder to recognise that we already have a physical ID system that works and has worked for many years now. So sometimes the safest option is the simplest one.
Thank you, Senator. And now I would like to give the floor to Andrew Bridgen, and I'm already curious what you have to tell us. Go ahead. 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Christine. Ladies and gentlemen, the last time I addressed you from this room, we came together, was when we joined together to raise the fears of the existential threat to our freedom and liberty posed by the World Health Organization, the Pandemic Treaty and the amendments to the International Health Regulation. We find ourselves once again coming together with a new existential threat being pushed by our governments, and this time it's digital ID. Christine, freedom is under such threat in the UK that as of Friday, a friend and colleague of mine, who happens to have a double doctorate from Cambridge University, was ruled in a court of law that she will go to prison if she speaks to me directly or indirectly, and she has been charged with no crime. That is the state of justice in the UK at the moment. And the UK government has announced, initially it announced mandatory digital ID through something called the Brit card, which sounds very patriotic, until you realise that Brit actually stands for biometric registration, identification and tracking, which they didn't tell the British people. Our government has now announced, in the face of a public backlash, 2/3 of the UK population have reservations about digital ID and don't really want it. They basically said it's no longer mandatory, but you'll have to have it to be able to function in our society moving forward. Our global masters, the self-proclaimed elites, yes, those people who perpetrate horrendous crimes against children, have decided for us that the social model moving forward will be the Chinese social credit scoring system. They cannot sell that to us through the ballot box democratically, so they have to bring it in by subterfuge, and that is exactly what's happening now. Digital ID is a trap, and it's always better to avoid a trap than to try and get out of it once we're in it. If we agree to digital ID, we'll be giving control of almost every aspect of our lives to our governments. We'll not only be giving every aspect of our lives to our governments, but we'll be giving every aspect of our children's lives, our grandchildren's lives, and indeed generations of our nations yet unborn. Because this digital ID is a one-way street. No government's ever going to give that power up. And to give this much power to any government, you'd have to trust them implicitly. I would ask you, how much do you all trust your governments, particularly in the wake of the pandemic response and the way they treated us? Currently in the UK, we have a government which has the lowest approval ratings ever in history. Apparently it's down to 11% of the population trusts the government currently, and quite honestly, given their actions, I'm surprised it's that high. We are always told that the digital ID will make us more secure, safer, and it'll be convenient. History shows us repeatedly that those who are willing to give up freedom for security end up with neither freedom nor security, and the only convenience will be in our government's ability to control every aspect of our lives. When I was in the UK Parliament, I initially suggested, when they talked about digital ID, that we should have a pilot scheme, and it should involve the elected members and the members of the House of Lords, maybe for a couple of years, and we should give the public full access to everything we say, everywhere we go, everything we do, everything we spend our money on. And then perhaps after that pilot, we could have a debate on whether we felt it was intrusive or not. As you can imagine, I didn't get much support across the House for my proposal. So people will say to you, with regard to digital ID, well, but if you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to worry about. That is as ludicrous as saying, I don't need freedom of speech because I've got nothing to say. Ladies and gentlemen, for the sake of humanity, say no to digital ID. For the sake of future generations, those future generations who will never know the freedoms that we gave away for them, and it will not happen in my name. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you, Andrew. That was very interesting to have the politicians just be monitored around the clock. I remember when we requested that all the MEPs in this House please provide their vaccination status, because we wanted to know whether or not they took that mRNA injection. Then all of a sudden it was a matter of privacy, and they would not disclose it. So it was struck down. Interesting, right? So I would now like to open the floor for questions. Yes, we have a question up here. Please go ahead.
Well, just a quick comment. Christine, ladies and gentlemen, I would just like to add that sitting here as a guest from Iceland, it is a bit overwhelming, of course, to hear what you say. But I will say that I want to say that the devil is in the detail here as elsewhere, and we are in a, I will say, not only a power struggle. This is a spiritual struggle that we're in, and the enemy, define it as you will, with this global, huge conglomerate power of politics and finances, they use our lowest denominator. They use the lowest denominators of fear and greed to get through our defenses. So what I would just shortly like to say is that we should be good enough to fight this from a whole different perspective and find our highest ideals to confront the evil that is being pressed upon us. So I will say from my perspective, Iceland was basically eaten up, is being eaten up by the EU under the guise of this would bring us financial security, etc. And now this is costing us our democracy, our laws, our sovereignty, our independence. That's what's happening, and this is all done under the guise of international legal order, which now, today, is shown to be a farce, because the EU is doing whatever now the big boys tell them to do. So there is no international big legal order to play along with. And we just have to remember that we have seen in our lifetimes how, for example, agriculture was changed from being a humane field of work into being an industry where the animals were treated all of a sudden like just numbers. And this is what can happen in our lifetime to us as humans, that we will be treated like cattle. So we have a huge task before us. And this is just my reminder. We have also the option of confronting this from the highest ideals. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well,
and if I may add, there is a huge spiritual awakening going on in the world, and we are going to win this.
Yes. You know, I have to admit. So, yeah. Any more questions? Go ahead. Don't be shy. Please, go ahead. Please use the mic. Yes. The button in the center.
Yeah. Do you hear me? Yeah. Is there not a little bit light at the end of the tunnel if you look at Nigeria, where they tried it as well, but it failed completely? Or do you see that failing is actually an instruction to make it better?
Just for clarification, what did they try there? The
CBDC.
Digital ID?
Yeah.
There is light at the end of the tunnel. And we're already seeing that because people are waking up. They're becoming actually alert. And that's the beauty of the whole pandemic they unleashed on us. They completely overplayed their hand. And so many people woke up to what is actually going on. And that was their biggest mistake they made, actually. And, I mean, the people took to the streets and protested, and they never, ever counted on anything like that. They were totally dumbfounded when that happened. And, of course, they're trying to learn from it now. But, yeah, the more vocal we are, and conferences like this, and there were some suggestions and tips. You know, speak to your neighbors. Want to be a little more subtle. You know, when you're shopping at the supermarket, you know, you stand in line to pay or whatever. You know, just start a conversation, but don't overwhelm the people with, you know, and you have to know this and you have to know that. Don't do that. Just ask a question. You know, like, isn't it nice that we actually can still pay with cash? And see how they react. And it will start, you know, conversation. So you haven't given away what your stance is, and you will see what they come back with. But yeah, there is absolutely light at the end of the tunnel, and people are waking up, and that's the good news. Yeah. So, other questions? Yes, please, go ahead.
My question is to Dr. Hubmer-Mogg, and I would like to know what actions MEHA is taking for the digital ID to counter the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a lot of plans already made. We do have our groups meeting in the next week on Tuesday to then refine actions that the countries who want to do what we suggest, and we heard some of our team members speaking here today, that they implement that in form of grassroots movement activities, etc. And there will definitely be also, especially with the MEHA Next Generation Youth Committee that we have with Montgomery Toms leading it, we will have bi-weekly calls that will be live streamed also on X for especially young people, but everybody of course can join in, and we will bring ideas how people can act and not only react for themselves and for their nations.
If I can also ask you, Mrs. Anderson,
I only can
question.
take one more question, yeah. Okay. So I would like to give someone else the chance. There you go. But I would like to, a few minutes just to wrap a few things up. Another important thing I wanted to touch on. Andrew, you mentioned, the notion if you have nothing to hide, so what are you afraid of? It is totally ridiculous. Because the point is this, whether or not you have something to hide, it's not up to you. It's not up to you. I mean, what people think about is, well, I don't plan on robbing a bank and, I don't plan on killing. So, yeah, they think, well, I have nothing to hide since I don't plan on robbing a bank or, breaking any law. But the point is, they changed the freaking laws. They changed the rules on you. You consider yourself to be an upright, totally honest citizen. And bam, they changed the rules on you. You want an example? Guess what? In the United States, up until April 30th of 1933, you had nothing to hide if you owned gold. You had absolutely nothing to hide. And boom, the next day, it was illegal to privately own gold. So if you owned gold from one day to the next, guess what? You had something to hide. And you would have never guessed it. So stick that line. If you have nothing to hide, what is your problem? Stick it. Seriously. And then I wanted to touch on what Montgomery said. You said, I think, you have the capacity to say no. Well, not only do you have the capacity to say no, you have the duty to say no. Because, ladies and gentlemen, always remember, silence and compliance enable tyrants. And once you tell them no, not only will you let them know that you won't play their stupid little game, you will also take the power away from them. They are relying on that you are complying. That's what they want from you. And I get it. A lot of people, they comply because they're afraid of what their government might do to them if they didn't comply. The truth is, they should be way more afraid of what your government will do to you if you do comply. Don't comply. Have the courage and the guts and the sense of duty to say no. Take the power away from them, and then they have nothing. They have absolutely nothing. And if a lot of people start saying no, what are they going to do? What are they going to do? I tell you what they will do. Nothing, absolutely nothing. They will gradually roll back this whole shenanigans and will pretend, well, we've always been saying that. That was stupid stuff. That's what will happen. We're seeing it all the time. So this is pretty much me wrapping this up. Go out there, spread the message of what is coming, and always remember, when the government wants something from you and you don't want to do it, simply say no. Thank you very much. So this conference is now coming to an end. I thank you very much for having been here. A lot of you traveled very far. I really appreciate that. But we are in this together, and we need to win this fight. And I think we're in a good way of doing that. You all traveled safely. Come back home, and see you next time. Thank you.